Hey everyone, welcome back to the video. Today I'm going to be doing my FUT Valorant roster rebuild. Today I'm going to be going through this whole roster, giving you guys the players that I think they should keep, players I think they should drop, and then I think the players that I think they should replace the players that they drop with. So if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. I've been doing this as a series for quite a while now since Champs ended, so if you're interested in pretty much any team at this point, there's probably a video out on them. We're getting towards the end of this series here. There's only like a few more teams in EMEA. I think this might actually be my last EMEA team. I'm not quite sure. Let me double check that actually while I'm here. No, we have one more EMEA team after this, which is Carmine Corps. And then we're getting into like recap videos going through the teams that I did not make 2 or more changes to, or maybe talking a little bit about maybe different changes that I'd make to Vitality since I did them much earlier in the year. So if you guys enjoy this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Go check out those past videos. Also, I will be streaming the Red Bull home round games on my Twitch, maybe on my YouTube. We'll see if I feel like it. But I'll be live on the 14th, 15th, and 16th, depending on when I upload this video. So if you're watching this video, I could be live right now. So you can go check that out. I'll be co-streaming all of those games during those days. And then after that, we'll probably be doing some off-season tournament reviews like the Sen City Classic and tournaments like that. So if you're interested in any of that, go check out my Twitch. Links in the description. And yeah, let's get right into it. So before we get into this video, we need to do a couple things. I do want to clarify that this video is strictly what I would do with this roster, not what I think will happen. Now, we really haven't heard too much about FUT, so that shouldn't really be an issue in this video necessarily. But one thing that we need to do is we need to go through what this team did in 2025 to set up for what we're supposed to do in 2026. So they replaced CNED with Zeus heading into 2025 on that duelist role. A move that I was a little bit skeptical about because I do think CNED was pretty good for them in 2024. But they replaced him nonetheless, and they got 4th at EMEA kickoff. Zeus looked amazing at that tournament and was genuinely one of the best duelist players in EMEA during that stretch. Then they went 3-2 in stage 1, but got 5th and 6th during playoffs, and that was a little bit disappointing because this team had hovered around that 4th place slot for a long, long time in EMEA, and that was the first time they really dipped. And the thing with Zeus during that stretch was, who I think is the most important player, the guy that I think a lot of people were paying attention to, specifically on FUT, was he was unbelievable during stage 1, during the regular season. And I think up until that last game that they played in the regular season, where he didn't play so well, and they had that like super long game against BBL that, wait, I think it was this game, right? Yeah, the 25-22 game where he didn't play very well. And then after that, it never really got better. Like, his playoff performance wasn't very good. His stage 2 performance overall also wasn't very good, where they went 2-3 and missed the playoffs after adding in CNED instead of Captain to get a little bit more firepower. To be fair, in stage 2 with Zeus, he was playing a lot more like Raze and stuff, which I don't as much attribute to his own performance. But overall, like with this team as a whole, a fairly disappointing year considering they have been used to making at least one international in the past few years with this core of like Fallen, Cracks, and Ada Captain at least, who was playing on the team at the beginning half of the year. All right, now heading into what we have to work with this team is we have a bunch of players on 2026 contracts in Zeus, Yedege, Cracks, Mr. Fallen, and Ada Captain, so we can pretty much do whatever we want with those guys, whether we want to keep them or cut them. We make that decision, not necessarily the player from our point of view. But CNED is on an expiring contract for 2025. We'll have to re-sign him if we want to keep him. So for what we will be doing is we'll be cutting everybody except for Yedege. Now, this might seem a little crazy, honestly, because I think a lot of people think FUT as a solid team that, like, if you let this roster kind of run it back next year, maybe with 1 or 2 changes here and there, you could see them possibly making it to international events. And while that's kind of my goal for this roster is making it so they can make it to international events, I don't think this roster, this iteration of these 5 players necessarily has a chance to even compete at international events realistically. Like they could make it there if EMEA is not in a great shape as a region, but overall, like if you're sending this team to international events against the top teams from other regions, they're not going to do very well. So we're going to keep our best player in Yedije here, who I don't think the rest of the team was bad around him, and I don't think he was by far the best player, but I think he's definitely the most consistent out of everybody. I think the two players that people are probably going to have questions about are Zeus, who I talked about a lot during that intro about that recap, because I think he was a big swing point during the year for them. I think there's just better Turkish duelists in tier 2 than him overall, and or just better Turkish duelists available in general than him. Just because he had that really good run at the beginning of the season, but after that it kind of fizzled out and wasn't very good, even when he was playing his good agents that like the Neon and stuff like that. So I could see them keeping him in real life. I wouldn't be fully against that because the guy that we picked up did go to somewhere else in real life anyways, so it doesn't really matter. But yeah, Zeus I think is an extremely good duelist player despite getting cut here, or I think could be an extremely good duelist player despite getting cut here. I think he could even transition to a different role, but I personally would probably want him on Sentinel or Smokes, and I do like the guys that I picked up in those roles specifically. So he's going to go. And then Mr. Fallen, while he is a solid IGL, I just think the way this team has worked for the past few years and their general system just isn't something that I've been a huge fan of. So I am going to replace him, and he's just not a good enough fragger to like justify keeping him necessarily, even if we pick up a different IGL. So he is going to go. And then I do just want to talk about cracks, because if they keep him in real life, they're legitimately trolling. Like I really don't like calling out players like this, but they have kept him for like 3 years and he has not been good for any of them. He is good on one, maybe two agents in KO, and his Sage is pretty decent as well, which I think honestly, him being on Sage for this meta isn't actually that bad, but that kind of fucks up the rest of the team's roles. So I don't know about that, but like he'll play other stuff for this team. Like he plays Breach occasionally, some Neon, some Raze, some Fade, which are all he's not good at and is not a tier 1 caliber player on those roles. So he's just not flexible. He is mechanically talented, and I think I get why they've kept him, because he's a mechanically talented player who is extremely good on KO. And if you can force the KO on certain maps, maybe he can be pretty good. But unless you're in a run KO on every single map kind of meta, he's just not a good player, or a player worth keeping necessarily. He's not like some other flex players where they have that flexibility of playing a secondary sentinel, a secondary duelist, any of that kind of stuff. He's just not that kind of player. So we're going to have to let him go here as well. And then CNED add a captain. I just don't think we're quite good enough for this team throughout stage 1 and 2 throughout the year. So those are our roster changes for this team. So getting onto what we need pretty much everything outside of that Sentinel role. I think Yedije does leave a couple gaps in terms of like some newer, like more meta Sentinels for 2026 necessarily in this team that maybe some other players might need to pick up. But I think overall, Yedije can learn stuff in the offseason, so that doesn't really prevent us from picking up anybody necessarily. So overall, getting into the options for these roles, we have flex players, we have Drain, Sociable, and potentially Fabian coming over from Ulf if they decide to let like a player or two go, like if we decide to poach somebody from that team, which I think is very possible. We've seen it even just now with BBL Pacific coming up and their entire team getting poached by BBL. For scan initiators, we have Sociable, Reezy, and Tuvin, who I think are all very solid options on that scan initiator role. I did remove Sociable in my BBL rebuild that I did earlier, like a few weeks ago. I did it wasn't my last EMEA video, but it was the one before that, so you can go check that out if you're interested. For duelists, you have Comeback, who I let go in my Gentlemates rebuild, Izzy, and then Sop also potentially coming over from Ulf. And then for controllers, you have Prosh, Stairben, and potentially Audaz also from Ulf as well. So overall, quite a bit of options here. Now getting into the players that we actually did pick up for this roster. So I think the easiest pickup for this team after getting rid of Zeus was Comeback. I mean, one of the best tier 2 duelist players of all time, was unbelievably good with BBL Pacific. He did come up to tier 1 last year for stage 2. He wasn't terrible, but personally, he did not live up to my expectations. He had some really good moments in there, some really good rounds and stuff like that, but nothing that was like over the top amazing. So that wasn't great, but I really don't expect that player that we saw on Gentlemates to be the player that we see from Comeback in 2026. I think he'll be a much, much better version going to Team Heretics in real life, and being a good player there. I think would much or very much boost his stock, and I very much believe in him to be good on that team. But I think just putting him into a better team system, in this FUT team as well, and a Turkish speaking system here on FUT, would let him develop better and live up to his insanely high potential that he showed in tier 2 and be a great duelist player in VCT EMEA. Moving on to our second player here, our flex player, which will be Drain, who I actually picked up on last year's FUT rebuild. I do the series every year, so he was a player that I had my eyes on last year because I thought this team should be replacing Cracks, and I'm going to pick him up again here because I think he's really solid. There's not really too many other Turkish teams that I'm going to be rebuilding, at least in the series. Obviously, there's two that are being promoted, but that's a separate thing. But yeah, he's an extremely good flex player who can fill pretty much every gap in comps outside of like a main like primary controller, like an Omen or an Astra or a Brim. But I do think he could probably play that if needed, specifically the Astra and the Brim. I think those are more his style than the Omen. But I just think straight up, he's an upgrade over Cracks in pretty much every aspect. Like, no matter what you want him to play, outside of maybe like you could argue Flash Initiator, but I do think overall, just overall on Initiator roles, Drain is actually more flexible and better on each individual agent. Like, Drain is still very good at KO, and extremely good at Breach, where Cracks is like unbelievably good at KO and kind of okay on Breach. And I think Drain can also play Gecko and everything like that, as well as being better on the Sentinel roles and stuff like that. I think Cracks, if you put Cracks on Omen, I think he could potentially have a better Omen than Drain. But otherwise, I think Drain is pretty much better at everything else other than that Omen and the KO, and maybe like a Sage or a Gecko in there. I think is where you're kind of switching, or like maybe arguing for Cracks over Drain, but like Cracks also like isn't that great in terms of like decision making and stuff like that. And I think Drain is much, much better in that aspect as well. So overall, just the better player here in Drain, and a fairly solid upgrade, and a player that I'm very, very excited to watch potentially play in tier 1 next year. Now onto our third player and our IGL here in Sociable. He was a player on BBL that I just didn't think fit with a lot of the players that I wanted to bring in. Like, I wanted to bring in a player like Rose, who plays a ton of Scan Initiator and is an IGL. But Sociable kind of conflicts with both of those roles. As like a flex Scan Initiator player, he's not like a huge Flash Initiator player, even though he could play there. He also clashes with LaRock, who plays a lot of those roles as well. So that was a bit of an issue for him. But for me, he's just an amazing scan slash flex player. Like, I think you want him primarily playing the scan initiators, but can occasionally flex around and play some other stuff like the chamber and whatnot. And I think he can genuinely play any role for your team, outside of maybe like putting him on a primary controller where he's going to be playing Omen, Astra, Brim every single map. I don't think that's really his thing. I think he could probably, and maybe Sentinels as well, like stuff like the Cypher, Killjoy, all that stuff. I don't think he's quite as good as that at that, but any kind of initiator really, he can play to a very, very high level. He can play some duelists, some chambers, some senti, some smokes here and there. I think all very, very good for sociable, and he's extremely good at those. And as well, I think he can IGL. He did it in tier 2, and I would imagine he could do it at least to a decent level in tier 1 to like kind of reset the system a little bit here and maybe try some new stuff out, get a different POV on the game and stuff like that. So He's a very good player that I very, very much believe in. He was a guy that I was a huge believer in heading into last year, and he definitely lived up to those expectations. And I think could he be even better in 2026 for even a new team heading in here and while IGLing as well. So yeah, extremely, extremely good player. Now, onto another player that I've had my eyes on for quite a while in Tier 2 is Sterben, who is a smokes player that has played in, I think, a few teams in Turkish Tier 2, but has been extremely good, is extremely flexible across all the smokes agents. And he's also played quite a bit of KO and some scan initiators, but I would I would be shocked if he played that for this team. I think if you really, really wanted to run like a triple initiator comp or something like that with this roster, you could put Yedije on like a smokes roll and then put Sterben on that like KO like initiator roll or something like that. I think that would be fine. But like I I wouldn't really go for that. But he can play Viper, Astra, Omen, Brim. I'd imagine he can play Harbor to a decent degree. Uh, Let me double check that if he's played it before at all. He has played a little bit of Harbor, not a ton, but he's also played like a little bit of Sentinel here and there. So like he can play pretty much everything you need him to on this smokes role, as well as maybe a tiny bit of other stuff here and there as well. So that's overall pretty good. And the thing for me with Sterven is he's an overall firepower upgrade over Ada Captain. Like he's better aimer, mechanics, all that kind of stuff over Ada Captain. And probably even with this next point, like he's better in his smokes role than CNED, where like he's better at actually playing the agents. I think he's also better at actually playing the agents than Ada Captain. Maybe CNED might be a tad bit better in terms of the firepower, in terms of the shooting and creating like kills for his team and getting stuff that maybe he shouldn't be getting away with. Sterben, I don't think is quite as good as that stuff, but he's still a very good supportive smokes player. And I do think this team needs some like supportive players with Comeback and Drain and Yedije. I think overall you need some kind of players to sit back a little bit, maybe take a little bit of a backseat and let the other guys kind of do what they need to do. And I think that's really good from your smokes player as well with Sterben, where he's going to be staying alive a lot of the time later into the rounds. So overall, a player that I've been very impressed with for a few years. And yeah, that's our final piece for this team with Comeback, Drain, Sociable, Sterben all being picked up here. I think are all very, very good talents in Turkey in Tier 2 and in Tier 1 with in the case of Comeback and Sociable, as well as alongside Yedije, who is extremely good on the Sentinel role and one of the better players on that in EMEA. So let me know what you guys think of this team in the comments below. This is one of my favorite teams that I built. Honestly, I really, really, really like this team. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. Go check out my stream. I'll be live for Red Bull Homeground probably at the end of when you're watching this video, most likely. So yeah, go check that out. Links in the description. I might be live on this channel as well. Depends if I feel like it. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.